Around the world, ancient civilizations built incredible structures thousands of years ago. Stone tombs hidden beneath hills, fortified settlements, massive temples, and mysterious sanctuaries. Many of these places are older than the pyramids, and even today archaeologists are still trying to understand why they were built. In this video, we're exploring some of the most fascinating ancient sites ever discovered, from prehistoric farming settlements to massive megalithic tombs and Bronze Age fortresses. But before we begin, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Let me know in the comments. Now let's begin. The fortified settlement of Los Millares. In the dry hills of southeastern Spain, not far from the Mediterranean coast, lies one of the most important prehistoric archaeological sites in Europe. Overlooking the valley of the Andarex River, the ruins of an ancient settlement stretch across a rocky ridge. This place is known as Los Millares. At first glance, the landscape appears quiet and almost empty. Low stone walls and scattered ruins blend into the surrounding hills. But thousands of years ago, this ridge was the center of one of the most advanced communities in prehistoric Iberia. Los Millares dates back to around 3200 BCE, during the Copper Age, a time when human societies were beginning to experiment with metal for the first time. Across many parts of Europe, communities were still small and relatively simple. But here in southern Spain, something different was happening. A large fortified settlement was growing. The people who built Los Millares chose their location carefully. The settlement stands on elevated ground between two river valleys, creating natural protection on several sides. From this vantage point, inhabitants could observe the surrounding landscape for kilometers. Anyone approaching the settlement would have been visible long before reaching its walls. But natural defenses alone were not enough. The builders constructed an impressive system of stone fortifications that surrounded the settlement. These defenses included multiple concentric walls built from stone and reinforced with towers positioned at strategic points. Approaching the settlement would have been difficult. An attacker would first encounter an outer wall. Beyond that stood additional defensive lines, each creating another barrier before reaching the center of the community. The entrance passages were narrow and carefully designed, forcing visitors to move slowly through controlled gateways. For a society living more than 5,000 years ago, these fortifications were remarkably sophisticated. Inside the walls, archaeologists discovered the remains of houses, workshops, and open spaces where daily life unfolded. The homes were typically circular structures built with stone foundations and walls made from mud and organic materials. Families lived together in small clusters, sharing resources and working cooperatively to sustain the community. The people of Los Millares were skilled farmers. They cultivated crops such as wheat and barley in the nearby valleys, using the fertile soil along the riverbanks to support their growing population. But agriculture was not their only activity. Los Millares became one of the earliest centers of metalworking in Western Europe. Nearby mountains contained deposits of copper ore. The inhabitants learned how to extract this metal from stone and shape it into tools, weapons, and ornaments. This new technology marked a major turning point in human history. Copper tools were stronger and more durable than stone tools, allowing people to expand their abilities in farming, construction, and craftsmanship. Workshops discovered within the settlement show evidence of smelting and metal production, indicating that Los Millares was an important center for early metallurgy. Trade networks likely connected the settlement with other communities across the Iberian Peninsula. Raw materials and finished goods may have moved through these networks, helping spread new technologies and ideas throughout the region. But perhaps the most remarkable feature of Los Millares lies beyond the walls of the settlement itself. Surrounding the hill are more than 80 stone tombs, forming one of the largest prehistoric burial grounds in Europe. These tombs were built as thalos structures, circular burial chambers made from stone and covered by earth mounds. Each tomb was connected to a narrow entrance passage that led into the burial chamber inside. Within these chambers, archaeologists discovered the remains of individuals buried alongside pottery, tools, jewelry, and other objects. These items suggest that burial rituals played an important role in the culture of Los Millares. The placement of the tombs around the settlement may also have had symbolic meaning. The ancestors of the community were literally surrounding the living settlement, forming a connection between past and present. Such arrangements reflect the importance of ancestry and tradition in early societies. For several centuries, Los Millares flourished as a center of population, technology, and cultural activity, but eventually the settlement began to decline. Around 2200 BCE, many Copper Age communities across the Iberian Peninsula experienced major changes. Climate shifts may have altered agricultural conditions. Social and political changes may have reshaped the networks that connected different settlements. Over time, Los Millares was gradually abandoned. The houses fell into ruin. The defensive walls collapsed, and the once busy settlement slowly became part of the surrounding landscape. For thousands of years, the remains of the ancient city lay quietly on the hillside. It was not until the late 19th century that archaeologists began studying the site in detail. Excavations revealed the complex system of fortifications, the metalworking workshops, and the vast cemetery that surrounded the settlement. These discoveries transformed our understanding of prehistoric Europe. Los Millares showed that large, organized communities with advanced technology existed in Iberia thousands of years before classical civilizations appeared in the region. Today, the site remains one of the most important archaeological locations in Spain. Visitors walking across the ridge can still see the outlines of the ancient walls and the scattered remains of the houses that once stood there. Beyond the settlement, the circular burial mounds remain visible across the landscape. Together, these ruins tell the story of a community that thrived more than 5,000 years ago. A society that mastered early metalworking, built powerful defenses, and left behind one of the earliest fortified settlements in Western Europe. And on the dry hills above the Andarix Valley, the stones of Los Millares still stand as quiet witnesses to that distant world. The Naveta des Tudons megalithic tomb. On the Mediterranean island of Menorca, one of Spain's Balearic Islands, a quiet stone monument rises from the open countryside. At first glance, it looks unusual, almost like the hull of a large boat turned upside down and resting on the ground. This ancient structure is known as the Naveta des Tudons. The word naveta itself comes from the Catalan word for small ship. Early observers thought the monument resembled an inverted boat, and the name has remained ever since. Yet this structure is far more than an oddly shaped pile of stones. It is one of the oldest and best preserved prehistoric buildings in the entire Mediterranean region. The Naveta des Tudons dates back to around 1200 BCE, during the Late Bronze Age, a time when the island of Menorca was home to a unique prehistoric culture known today as the Taliatic culture. These communities developed their own distinctive architectural traditions, constructing stone towers, ceremonial sites, and burial monuments across the island. The Naveta was one of their most remarkable creations. Unlike temples or defensive structures, the Naveta des Tudons served a very different purpose. It was a collective burial tomb. The monument is built entirely from large limestone blocks carefully stacked without mortar. The stones fit together with such precision that the structure has remained standing for more than 3,000 years. The building measures about 14 meters long and nearly 7 meters high, with thick stone walls that curve inward as they rise, creating the distinctive boat-like shape. Inside the monument lies a narrow entrance passage that leads into the interior chambers. The tomb contains 2 levels. The lower chamber is a rectangular space with a corbelled stone roof, meaning that each layer of stone slightly overlaps the one below it until they meet at the top. Above this chamber lies a second, smaller chamber accessible through a passage within the wall. These spaces were used to hold the remains of the dead. Archaeological excavations inside the Naveta revealed the bones of more than 100 individuals, along with pottery vessels, personal ornaments, and tools. These discoveries confirmed that the structure was used as a communal burial site, where members of the community were placed over many generations. The objects found inside the tomb offer clues about the beliefs and rituals of the people who built it. Pottery vessels may have contained food or drink offerings. Personal items such as jewelry and tools were likely placed alongside the dead as part of burial ceremonies. Such practices suggest that the inhabitants of Minorca believed in some form of continued existence after death. The tomb may have served as a sacred place where the living maintained a connection with their ancestors. Building a structure like the Naveta des Tudons required careful planning and cooperation. The large limestone blocks used in the construction were gathered from nearby areas and transported to the site without the help of metal tools or wheeled vehicles. The builders relied on simple tools made from stone, wood, and bone. Yet despite these limitations, they achieved a level of precision that allowed the structure to remain stable for thousands of years. The placement of the monument within the landscape was also likely deliberate. The tomb stands along what would have been an important route connecting different parts of the island. Its distinctive shape and size would have made it a visible landmark in the surrounding countryside. For the communities living on Minorca during the Bronze Age, the Naveta may have served not only as a burial site, but also as a symbol of ancestry and identity. Over time, however, the society that built the Navetas began to change. New forms of architecture appeared across the island, including the large stone towers known as talayots. These structures became central features of later talayotic settlements. As these cultural changes took place, the Navetas were gradually abandoned as burial sites. Centuries passed. The interior chambers fell silent. Yet the stone structure remained standing. Local legends eventually grew around the monument. One popular story tells of two giants competing for the love of a woman. According to the legend, each giant attempted to build a structure to impress her. One constructed the Naveta, while the other dug a well. But when the giant digging the well discovered water first, a fight broke out between them, and the builder of the Naveta was killed before completing his monument. Like many legends, the story reflects the mystery surrounding the monument. For generations, people wondered how such a massive stone structure could have been built so long ago. Modern archaeological research has helped reveal the true history of the site. Excavations carried out during the 20th century uncovered the human remains and artifacts that confirmed its role as a prehistoric tomb. Today, the Naveta des Tudons is recognized as one of the most important prehistoric monuments in the Balearic Islands. It remains one of the best preserved Navetas ever discovered. Visitors standing before the structure can still see the carefully stacked stones forming the curved walls of the monument. The entrance remains visible, and the distinctive silhouette of the tomb still resembles the shape of an ancient ship resting on the land. More than 3,000 years after it was built, the Naveta des Tudons continues to stand quietly in the Minorcan countryside, a monument to the beliefs, traditions, and architectural skill of the prehistoric people who once called this island home. The Nuraghe su Nuraxi Stone Tower Complex. In the heart of the Mediterranean island of Sardinia, surrounded by rolling hills and open countryside, stands one of the most remarkable prehistoric structures in Europe. From a distance, it appears as a massive stone tower rising from the landscape, built entirely from large blocks of dark basalt rock. This ancient structure is known as Su Nuraxi. It is the most famous example of a nuraghe, a type of stone tower unique to the island of Sardinia and built by a mysterious Bronze Age civilization that flourished there more than 3,000 years ago. Across Sardinia, archaeologists have discovered more than 7,000 nuraghe structures scattered across hills, valleys, and plains. But Su Nuraxi, located near the modern town of Barmini, is the largest and best preserved of them all. The site offers a rare glimpse into the world of the Nuragic civilization, a culture that dominated Sardinia from around 1800 BCE to 500 BCE. At the center of the complex stands the main tower, This massive structure rises about 18 meters high, built from enormous basalt stones, carefully stacked without mortar. The tower has thick walls that taper inward as they rise, forming a cone-shaped structure that resembles a prehistoric fortress. Inside the tower, a narrow entrance passage leads into a circular chamber. The roof of this chamber was built using a corbelled dome, a technique in which each layer of stone slightly overlaps the one below it until the structure closes at the top. This type of construction allowed the builders to create large interior spaces without using arches or support beams. From the central chamber, a spiral staircase leads upward through the thick stone walls to the upper levels of the tower. From the top, inhabitants could observe the surrounding countryside for many kilometers. But the central tower was only the beginning. Around the original structure, additional towers were constructed over time, connected by thick defensive walls. Eventually, the complex expanded into a fortified structure with 4 corner towers, forming a powerful defensive bastion surrounding the original tower. Between these towers lay an enclosed courtyard with a well that provided a reliable source of water. The walls and towers created a strong defensive system that protected the heart of the settlement. Beyond the central fortress, archaeologists discovered the remains of an entire village that once surrounded the tower complex. This village contained dozens of circular stone houses arranged along narrow pathways. Each house was built using stone walls and likely covered with wooden beams and thatched roofs. Within these homes, families cooked food, crafted tools, and carried out the daily activities of life in the Bronze Age. One particularly interesting structure discovered within the village is known as the meeting hut. Inside this building, archaeologists found stone seats arranged around the interior walls, suggesting that the space may have been used for gatherings or councils where community decisions were made. This indicates that the Nuragic society may have had organized systems of leadership and community discussion. Religion may also have played an important role in the life of the settlement. Nearby archaeological discoveries across Sardinia suggest that the Nuragic people built sacred wells and temples dedicated to water and other natural forces. These sites indicate that spiritual beliefs were closely connected to the natural environment of the island. The purpose of the Nurage towers themselves has long been debated. Some researchers believe they served primarily as defensive fortresses, protecting the surrounding communities from conflict or invasion. Others suggest that they may also have functioned as symbols of authority or status, representing the power of local leaders or clans. It is also possible that they served multiple roles, acting as watchtowers, community centers, and ceremonial spaces all at once. What is certain is that constructing Su-Nuraxi required enormous effort. The basalt stones used in the structure were gathered from nearby areas and transported to the site using simple tools and human labor. Without metal cranes or modern machinery, the builders relied on careful planning, teamwork, and engineering knowledge passed down through generations. The result was a structure strong enough to survive thousands of years. Over time, the settlement around Su-Nuraxi continued to evolve. New houses were built, the defensive walls were reinforced, and the village expanded into a thriving community connected to trade networks across the Mediterranean. Archaeologists have discovered artifacts at the site that suggest contact with distant cultures, including traders from the Phoenician and Mycenaean worlds. But by the early 1st millennium BCE, the Nuragic civilization began to change. New cultural influences arrived on the island as Mediterranean trade expanded. Eventually, Sardinia came under the influence of foreign powers, including the Phoenicians and later the Carthaginians. As these new societies developed, many of the old Nuragi settlements were abandoned or reused for different purposes. The village around Su-Nuraxi gradually declined. Houses collapsed, stones shifted, and layers of soil slowly covered the ruins. For centuries, the Great Tower remained standing as a silent monument in the Sardinian countryside. Local people were aware of the structure, but its true significance was not fully understood until modern archaeological excavations began in the 1950s. These excavations revealed the full scale of the complex and uncovered the remains of the surrounding village. Today, Sunuraxi is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, preserving one of the most important examples of prehistoric architecture in the Mediterranean. Visitors walking through the ruins can still climb the stone passages and see the towering walls that once protected the settlement. The central tower still rises above the surrounding landscape, just as it did more than 3,000 years ago. A powerful reminder of the mysterious Nuragic civilization that once dominated the island of Sardinia. The circular settlement of Archaim. In the wide grasslands of the southern Ural region of Russia, where the landscape stretches endlessly across the steppe, archaeologists discovered something remarkable during the late 20th century. At first, the area appeared to be nothing more than an open plain surrounded by low hills and winding rivers. But beneath the soil lay the remains of a perfectly planned ancient settlement. This site is known as Archaim. Unlike many prehistoric villages that grew slowly over time, Archaim appears to have been built according to a carefully designed plan. When viewed from above, the settlement reveals a striking circular shape. Two concentric rings of defensive walls formed the outer structure. Inside these walls, rows of houses were arranged in a precise circular pattern around a central open space. The design is so organized that it almost resembles the layout of a modern planned city. Archaim dates back to around 2000 BCE during the Bronze Age, when early societies across the Eurasian steppe were developing new technologies and complex social structures. The settlement was part of a larger archaeological culture known as the Sintashta culture, a society that played an important role in the development of early metallurgy and chariot technology. The discovery of Archaim itself happened relatively recently. In 1987, Soviet archaeologists were surveying the region before the construction of a large reservoir that would have flooded the valley. During the survey, researchers noticed unusual circular patterns in the soil. Further investigation revealed the outlines of walls and structures buried beneath the ground. When excavations began, archaeologists realized they had uncovered one of the most extraordinary Bronze Age settlements ever found in the Eurasian steppe. The entire city had been carefully constructed within a circular enclosure about 160 meters in diameter. The outer wall was built using timber frames, filled with earth and clay, forming a strong defensive barrier around the settlement. This wall may have stood several meters high, protecting the inhabitants from both environmental conditions and potential threats. Just inside the outer wall stood a ring of residential houses. Each house was connected to the wall itself, creating a continuous line of dwellings around the settlement. These houses were built using wood, clay, and other natural materials. Inside each home were hearths for cooking and heating, storage pits for food, and small working areas where daily tasks were carried out. Interestingly, each house also had its own drainage system. Channels built beneath the floors allowed water to flow away from the living spaces and into a central drainage network. For a settlement built more than 4,000 years ago, this level of planning is remarkable. A second inner wall separated the residential ring from the central open area. This central space may have served as a gathering place where community activities took place. It may also have been used for ceremonies, markets, or communal events that brought the inhabitants together. The design of the settlement suggests that the builders were not simply constructing houses. They were creating an organized urban environment where every part of the settlement had a specific function. Archaeological discoveries at Archaim reveal that the inhabitants were skilled metal workers. The Bronze Age was a time when new metal technologies were transforming human societies. Copper and tin were combined to create bronze, a metal stronger and more durable than stone or pure copper. At Archaim, researchers found evidence of metalworking furnaces and tools used for producing bronze objects. These discoveries indicate that the settlement may have been an important center for early metallurgy. The Sintashta culture associated with Archaim is also famous for another technological development. Some of the Earliest known chariots in human history were discovered in burial sites linked to this culture. These light, two-wheeled vehicles were drawn by horses and may have been used in warfare, hunting, or ceremonial activities. The development of chariot technology marked a significant turning point in the history of transportation and warfare. The people living at Archaeum likely played a role in this innovation. The settlement itself was not isolated. It was part of a broader network of similar fortified communities scattered across the steppe region. These settlements were connected through trade, cultural exchange, and shared technological knowledge. But Archaeum appears to have been one of the most sophisticated examples of this network. Despite its advanced design, the settlement did not last forever. Archaeological evidence suggests that the inhabitants eventually abandoned the city intentionally. In fact, many parts of the settlement show signs of being deliberately burned before the inhabitants left. The reasons for this abandonment remain uncertain. Environmental changes, migration, or shifts in social organization may have contributed to the decision to leave. Some researchers believe the burning of the settlement may have been part of a ritual or symbolic act marking the end of its occupation. After the inhabitants left, the structures slowly collapsed. Wind and soil gradually covered the ruins, preserving them beneath the steppe for thousands of years. Today, Archaeum is often referred to as the Russian Stonehenge, though its true significance is quite different. Rather than a ceremonial monument alone, Archaeum represents a rare example of an early planned settlement, demonstrating the organizational skills and engineering knowledge of Bronze Age societies. Visitors walking through the reconstructed site today can see the outlines of the circular walls and the foundations of the houses that once formed this remarkable community. From above, the circular layout remains clearly visible. A city built with precision. A settlement shaped by careful planning and advanced knowledge for its time. And a reminder that even 4,000 years ago, human societies were capable of creating complex and organized communities in the vast landscapes of the Eurasian steppe. The early farming settlement of Mehrgar. At the edge of the Bolan Pass in what is now Balochistan, Pakistan, lies one of the most important archaeological sites for understanding the early beginnings of farming and settled life in South Asia. This place is known as Mehrgar. Today the region appears as a dry landscape surrounded by low hills and desert plains. But thousands of years ago, this area served as a gateway between the fertile Indus Valley and the highlands of Central Asia. Because of its location, Mehrgar became one of the earliest places where human communities began experimenting with a new way of life, agriculture. The settlement of Mehrgar dates back to around 7000 BCE, making it one of the oldest known farming communities in South Asia. At that time, most human societies still lived as hunter-gatherers, moving across the landscape in search of food. But in certain parts of the world, people began learning how to cultivate plants and domesticate animals. Mehrgar represents one of the earliest examples of this transition. The first inhabitants of the settlement lived in simple mud brick houses, built from rectangular blocks of clay dried in the sun. These houses were arranged in small clusters, forming one of the earliest known village communities in the region. Inside the houses, archaeologists discovered storage areas where grains were kept. These discoveries show that the inhabitants were already cultivating crops, such as wheat and barley, which likely arrived through early agricultural exchanges with nearby regions. Animal domestication also played an important role in the life of the settlement. Evidence suggests that the people of Mehrgar raised cattle, sheep, and goats, animals that provided meat, milk, and other essential resources. The combination of farming and animal husbandry allowed the population to grow and remain in one place, rather than constantly moving across the land. Life in Mehrgar gradually became more complex over time. As the settlement expanded, new houses were built, and additional areas were developed for storage, craft production, and burial practices. One of the most interesting discoveries at the site involves early forms of craftsmanship. Archaeologists uncovered beads made from materials such as shell, stone, and turquoise. These ornaments suggest that the inhabitants were already experimenting with decorative art and personal jewelry. Some of the beads appear to have been produced using surprisingly advanced techniques. This indicates that specialized craft skills were beginning to emerge within the community. Mehrgar also provides fascinating insights into early medical knowledge. Among the most surprising discoveries at the site were human teeth showing signs of early dental treatment. Researchers found evidence that tiny holes had been carefully drilled into molars using stone tools. This procedure, known as early dentistry, dates back more than 7,000 years. It represents one of the oldest known examples of medical intervention in human history. These discoveries suggest that the inhabitants of Mehrgar had developed practical knowledge about health and treatment. Burial practices at the site also reveal important aspects of the community's beliefs. The dead were often buried in graves accompanied by objects such as pottery, tools, beads, and ornaments. These items may have been placed in the graves as offerings, suggesting that the people of Mehrgar believed in some form of existence after death. Some burials were more elaborate than others, indicating that differences in status or social roles may have existed within the community. Over the centuries, Mehrgar continued to evolve. New architectural styles appeared. Pottery production became more advanced, with beautifully painted ceramic vessels emerging during later phases of the settlement. These developments show that the community was becoming increasingly skilled in both craftsmanship and technology. Mehrgar did not exist in isolation. Its location along important travel routes allowed connections with neighboring regions. Trade networks likely linked the settlement with communities across the Iranian Plateau and the Indus Valley. These exchanges helped spread new ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. By around 2600 BCE, the region was entering a new phase of development. Large urban centers were beginning to appear in the Indus Valley civilization, including famous cities such as Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. As these cities grew, the importance of Mehrgar gradually declined. The settlement was eventually abandoned, and its population likely moved toward the expanding urban centers of the Indus Valley. Over thousands of years, the remains of the village became buried beneath layers of soil and sediment. For a long time, the site remained largely unnoticed, but in 1974, archaeological excavations began revealing the extraordinary history hidden beneath the ground. Researchers uncovered houses, tools, pottery, and burial sites that documented thousands of years of early human development. These discoveries transformed our understanding of the origins of agriculture in South Asia. Mehrgar showed that long before the rise of the great Indus Valley cities, communities were already experimenting with farming, crafting tools, and building permanent villages. Today, the site stands as one of the most important windows into the early history of human civilization in the region. Although the ancient houses have long since collapsed, the traces of the settlement remain visible across the landscape. Mehrgar reminds us that the story of civilization did not begin suddenly with large cities and monumental architecture. It began much earlier, with small communities learning to grow crops, build homes, and create new ways of living together. And in the quiet valley near the Bolan Pass, those early steps toward settled life first began more than 9,000 years ago. The Tassili Stone Shelter Complex. Deep in the vast desert landscapes of southeastern Algeria, where the sands of the Sahara stretch across the horizon, rises a remarkable plateau of sandstone cliffs and rock formations. This region is known as Tassili Najer. At first glance, the terrain appears harsh and almost lifeless. Towering rock pillars, narrow canyons, and natural stone arches dominate the landscape. The dry desert winds shape the cliffs into strange formations that resemble a silent stone city carved by nature. But hidden within these rocky shelters is evidence of a very different world. A world that existed thousands of years ago, long before the Sahara became the desert we know today. Scattered throughout the cliffs of Tassili are hundreds of stone shelters and caves, many of which contain some of the most extraordinary prehistoric rock art ever discovered. Together, these shelters form what archaeologists often call the Tassili Stone Shelter Complex. The site preserves an astonishing record of human life that stretches back more than 10,000 years. Today, the Sahara is one of the driest regions on Earth, but during the early Holocene period, the climate was very different. The Sahara was once a green landscape filled with rivers, lakes, and grasslands. Animals such as elephants, giraffes, crocodiles, and cattle lived across the region, and human communities thrived there. The stone shelters of Tassili provided natural protection from wind, rain, and sunlight. Early inhabitants used these rock formations as living spaces, gathering places, and ceremonial sites. Within these shelters, they left behind thousands of paintings and engravings that tell the story of their lives. The rock art found at Tassili is among the largest collections of prehistoric art in the world. Researchers have documented more than 15,000 images spread across the plateau. These paintings depict animals, human figures, hunting scenes, and everyday activities. They also reveal how the environment and the culture of the region changed over thousands of years. The earliest paintings belong to a period often called the Roundhead phase, which dates back to around 8000 BCE. These images show mysterious human-like figures with large, round heads and elongated bodies. Some appear to be floating or dancing. Others seem to wear elaborate masks or ceremonial clothing. The meaning of these figures remains uncertain. Some archaeologists believe they may represent spiritual beings or ritual participants involved in religious ceremonies. Later paintings show scenes of hunting and daily life. People are depicted chasing wild animals across open landscapes using bows, spears, and other hunting tools. These scenes offer a glimpse into the lives of early hunter-gatherer communities who depended on the rich wildlife of the Green Sahara. Over time, the artwork begins to change. Around 5000 BCE, new paintings appear showing domesticated animals, especially cattle. These images mark the arrival of pastoral societies that raised livestock across the region. Cattle became an important part of the culture, providing food, milk, and social wealth. Many of the paintings from this period show large herds of cattle being guided across grassy plains. Some images also depict ceremonial gatherings where people appear to be dancing or performing rituals connected to their animals. This stage of the artwork reflects a shift in lifestyle. Instead of relying solely on hunting, communities were developing systems of herding and pastoralism. The environment of the Sahara was still fertile enough to support these activities. But the climate was slowly beginning to change. As the centuries passed, the region became increasingly dry. The rivers and lakes that once supported life began to shrink. Grasslands gradually turned into desert. Later paintings at Tassili begin showing animals more suited to arid environments, such as camels, which appear in artwork dating to around 2000 BCE. By this time, much of the Sahara had already transformed into the desert we know today. Human populations gradually migrated toward regions with more reliable water sources. The once thriving communities that had lived among the Tassili shelters slowly disappeared from the plateau, but the artwork they left behind remained protected within the stone shelters. For thousands of years, the paintings survived in the dry desert air. Modern archaeological research began exploring the region in the mid-20th century. One of the most important figures in documenting the site was the French archaeologist Henri Lot, who led expeditions to Tassili in the 1950s. His team carefully recorded hundreds of paintings and brought international attention to the remarkable artistic heritage of the region. Today, the Tassili Najir Plateau is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The stone shelters and rock art continue to provide valuable insight into the environmental and cultural history of the Sahara. They show how landscapes can change dramatically over time, and how human societies adapt to those changes. Standing among the towering rock formations of Tassili, it is difficult to imagine that this desert was once a thriving landscape filled with water, animals, and human communities. But the paintings preserved within the shelters still tell that story. A story of a green Sahara, of hunters and herders, and of the ancient people who once lived beneath the stone shelters of Tassili thousands of years ago. The stone ruins of Jiroft. In the southern region of Iran, along the fertile valley of the Halil River, archaeologists uncovered a series of discoveries that challenged long-standing ideas about the origins of early civilization. This region is known today as Jiroft. For centuries, the area appeared to be little more than farmland and desert plains surrounded by mountains. But beneath the soil lay the remains of an ancient culture that may have flourished more than 5,000 years ago, during the early Bronze Age. The first major clues appeared in the early 2000s, when a heavy flooding along the Halil River exposed ancient objects buried beneath the ground. Soon afterward, local people began finding carved stone vessels and artifacts emerging from the soil. These discoveries attracted the attention of archaeologists. What they found suggested the presence of a large and complex ancient civilization. Excavations across the region revealed the remains of stone ruins, monumental structures, and extensive settlements spread across the valley. Among the most important sites were two large mounds known as Konar Sandal North and Konar Sandal South. These mounds contained the remains of large architectural structures built from mud, brick, and stone. But one of them appears to have been a massive stepped platform or fortress rising above the surrounding settlement. If confirmed, this structure may represent one of the earliest monumental buildings discovered in the region. The discoveries at Jiroft were surprising because historians had long believed that the earliest complex civilizations in the Middle East were centered primarily in Mesopotamia, particularly in cities such as Uruk and Ur. But the artifacts and architecture found in Jiroft suggested that another sophisticated culture may have existed alongside these early civilizations. Some researchers now believe the Jiroft region may have been part of an ancient culture sometimes referred to as the Halil River civilization. One of the most striking discoveries from the region was a large collection of beautifully carved chlorite stone vessels. These dark green or black stone objects were decorated with detailed engravings showing animals, mythological creatures, geometric patterns, and scenes that may represent ancient stories or beliefs. The level of craftsmanship is remarkable. The carvings often show eagles, serpents, bulls, and other animals arranged in complex compositions. Some scenes even appear to depict conflicts between humans and powerful creatures, suggesting that early forms of mythology or symbolic storytelling may have been part of the culture. These vessels have been found not only in Jiroft, but also in distant regions across the Middle East. Similar artifacts have appeared in Mesopotamian archaeological sites hundreds of kilometers away. This suggests that the people of Jiroft were part of a large trade network that connected multiple early civilizations across the ancient world. Trade routes likely carried stone vessels, metals, precious materials, and other goods between the Iranian plateau and the great cities of Mesopotamia. The architecture uncovered in the Jiroft Valley indicates that the region supported a large population. Excavations revealed the foundations of buildings, defensive structures, and large communal spaces that may have served administrative or ceremonial purposes. The stepped structure at Konar Sandal South, for example, appears to have been a monumental platform built with multiple terraces. Although erosion has damaged parts of the structure, its size suggests that it once dominated the surrounding settlement. Some archaeologists have proposed that the site may have functioned as a regional center of power, possibly controlling trade routes that passed through the valley. The Halil River Valley would have been an ideal location for early agriculture. Water from the river supported crops and livestock, while nearby mountains provided natural resources such as stone and minerals. These conditions allowed a complex society to develop in the region. Another intriguing discovery at Jiroft involves what may be one of the earliest writing systems ever found. Some tablets discovered at the site contain unusual symbols that resemble early forms of script. Although researchers are still studying these markings, they may represent a previously unknown writing system used by the ancient inhabitants of the region. If confirmed, this would provide important evidence that the Jiroft culture possessed its own system of communication and record keeping. However, the study of Gyroft has also been complicated by challenges. When the site was first discovered, many artifacts were removed illegally before proper archaeological excavations could take place. This looting damaged some of the historical context that researchers rely on to understand ancient sites. Despite these difficulties, ongoing research continues to reveal more about the ancient settlements of the Halil River Valley. The ruins and artifacts suggest that Gyroft may have been an important cultural center during the early Bronze Age, interacting with neighboring civilizations across the Middle East. Over time, however, the settlements in the region declined. Environmental changes, shifting trade routes, or political transformations may have contributed to the eventual disappearance of the culture. As centuries passed, the ruins were gradually buried beneath layers of soil and sediment. For thousands of years, the remains of this ancient society remained hidden beneath the landscape. Today, the discoveries at Gyroft continue to reshape our understanding of early civilization in the ancient Near East. They remind us that the story of the first cities and cultures is far more complex than once believed. And in the quiet valley of the Halil River, the stone ruins of Gyroft still hold many secrets, waiting to be uncovered. The Bampur Citadel ruins. In the arid landscapes of southeastern Iran, where desert plains stretch between rugged mountain ranges, there stands a large ancient mound overlooking the modern town of Bampur. At first glance, the site looks like a weathered hill rising above the surrounding land. But this hill is not natural. It is the remains of a fortified settlement that once served as an important center of trade and administration in one of the oldest crossroads of ancient civilizations. These ruins are known as the Bampur Citadel. The site is located in the Bampur Valley, a region that historically formed part of a major route connecting the Iranian plateau with the civilizations of the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia. Because of this strategic location, Bampur became an important point along early trade networks that carried goods, ideas, and cultural influences across large parts of Asia. Archaeological research suggests that the settlement at Bampur dates back to around 2500 BCE, during the Bronze Age. At that time, several early civilizations were emerging across the wider region, including the powerful cities of the Indus Valley civilization to the east and the great urban centers of Mesopotamia to the west. The people living in the Bampur Valley were part of this larger world of cultural exchange. The citadel itself was built on top of a large artificial mound, or tell, formed by centuries of continuous human occupation. As generations built homes and structures on top of earlier ones, the ground gradually rose higher, creating the elevated platform that now supports the ruins. From this position, the inhabitants could observe the surrounding valley and control the important routes that passed through the region. The defensive design of the citadel reflects its strategic importance. The settlement was surrounded by thick walls made from mud brick, a building material commonly used across the ancient Near East. Mud brick was created by mixing clay, water, and straw, then shaping the mixture into bricks that were dried in the sun. Although these bricks were simple, they were strong enough to support large defensive walls and buildings. Inside the fortified area stood houses, storage spaces, and administrative structures that formed the heart of the settlement. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of organized urban planning within the citadel. Rooms were arranged around courtyards, creating spaces where families and communities carried out their daily activities. Cooking, craft production, and storage all took place within these enclosed areas. Water management would have been especially important in this dry region. The nearby Bampur River provided a crucial source of water that supported agriculture and livestock. Farmers in the valley likely cultivated crops such as wheat and barley, which were common staples across Bronze Age societies. Animal herding also played an important role in sustaining the population. The position of the citadel suggests that it may have served as an administrative or political center within the region. Leaders controlling the settlement could oversee trade routes that connected distant civilizations. Caravans traveling through the valley may have carried materials such as metals, stones, textiles, and agricultural products between different parts of the ancient world. Artifacts discovered at the site support this idea. Excavations have uncovered pottery styles that resemble those found in both Indus Valley and Mesopotamian settlements. This suggests that the inhabitants of Bampur were part of a broader network of cultural interaction. Trade and communication between these regions allowed ideas, technologies, and artistic styles to spread across vast distances. Despite its importance, the settlement at Bampur did not remain stable forever. Archaeological layers showed that the site experienced several phases of occupation and rebuilding. Structures were constructed, destroyed, and rebuilt again over many centuries. This pattern suggests that the settlement faced periods of disruption, possibly caused by environmental changes, conflicts, or shifts in trade networks. Eventually, the importance of Bampur began to decline. As new trade routes developed and political centers shifted to other regions, the citadel gradually lost its role as a major settlement. The buildings fell into ruin, walls collapsed, and the once busy center of activity slowly turned into a silent mound of earth and broken brick. For many centuries, the ruins remained largely unnoticed. Wind and sand shaped the surface of the mound, while layers of soil gradually covered parts of the ancient structures. Modern archaeological investigations in the 20th century began revealing the history hidden beneath the site. Researchers studying the layers of the mound were able to reconstruct the long sequence of human occupation that once took place here. Their discoveries showed that Bampur had been an important link between some of the earliest civilizations of Asia. Today, the Bampur citadel stands as one of the key archaeological sites in southeastern Iran. Although the mud brick walls have been worn down by centuries of erosion, the shape of the citadel still dominates the landscape of the valley. From the top of the mound, the surrounding plains stretch out in every direction. It is easy to imagine how this location once served as a strategic center for trade, agriculture, and regional authority. The ruins of Bampur remind us that long before modern borders existed, ancient communities were already connected through networks of travel and exchange. And in this quiet valley of southeastern Iran, the remains of the citadel still mark the place where those ancient connections once passed through. The Sayhuit stone labyrinth, high in the mountains of southern Peru, not far from the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, lies a remarkable carved stone that has puzzled archaeologists and historians for decades. This unusual monument is known as the Sayhuit stone. Unlike towering temples or massive fortresses, the Sayhuit stone appears at first to be simply a large natural boulder resting on the ground. But when viewed closely, its surface reveals something extraordinary. The entire top of the stone is covered with an intricate network of carved channels, miniature structures, terraces, and pathways that resemble a tiny landscape carved into the rock. Because of this complex pattern of carvings, the monument is often described as the Sayhuit stone labyrinth. The stone itself measures roughly 4 meters across and rises about 2.5 meters above the ground. Its surface has been carefully sculpted into hundreds of detailed shapes. Small basins connect to narrow channels. Tiny stairways lead between carved terraces. Miniature buildings and platforms appear across the surface. The carvings form what looks almost like a miniature model of an entire landscape. Water channels wind through the stone like rivers. Small depressions resemble lakes or reservoirs. And stepped terraces appear similar to the agricultural terraces that cover many Andean hillsides. For many years, researchers have debated the purpose of this remarkable carving. One widely accepted theory is that the stone functioned as a hydraulic model. The Inca civilization was famous for its advanced water engineering. Across their empire, they built canals, fountains, irrigation systems, and drainage networks that carefully controlled the movement of water through cities and agricultural fields. The Sayhuite stone may have served as a kind of experimental model, where engineers could study how water moved through different channels and terraces by pouring water into the carved basins at the top of the stone. They could observe how the liquid flowed through the miniature system of channels. This would allow them to test different designs before building large irrigation systems in the real landscape. Another possibility is that the stone had a ceremonial or symbolic purpose. In the worldview of the Inca and earlier Andean cultures, water held deep spiritual significance. Rivers, springs, and lakes were often associated with powerful natural forces and sacred beings. The miniature landscape carved into the stone may have represented a symbolic model of the Andean world, connecting water, land, and human activity. The site where the stone stands also supports the idea that Sayhuit was a place of ritual importance. The monument is located within a broader archaeological area that contains terraces, stone structures, and ceremonial spaces. These surrounding features suggest that the site may have served as a gathering place where ceremonies connected to water and agriculture were performed. The stone itself shows remarkable craftsmanship. The carvings are extremely detailed, with smooth channels and carefully shaped depressions that demonstrate a high level of skill. The builders likely used stone tools and abrasive materials to gradually shape the rock over a long period of time. This careful work reflects the importance the monument must have held for the people who created it. Although the Sayhuit stone is often associated with the Inca civilization, some researchers believe that its origins may be even older. Certain stylistic elements of the carvings suggest that the monument may have been created by earlier Andean cultures and later incorporated into the Inca cultural landscape. If this is true, the stone may represent a tradition of hydraulic experimentation or ritual practice that developed long before the rise of the Inca Empire. Regardless of its exact origin, the stone clearly reflects the deep relationship that Andean societies had with their environment. In the high mountains of the Andes, managing water was essential for survival. Agricultural terraces allowed crops to grow on steep slopes. Canals carried water from mountain streams to fields and settlements. Careful control of water flow helped prevent erosion and flooding. The Sayhuit stone may have played a role in understanding and refining these techniques. At the same time, the monument also reflects the symbolic importance of water in Andean culture. Many Inca rituals involved offerings made to mountain spirits, rivers, and sacred springs. Water was seen as a life-giving force that connected the natural world with the spiritual realm. The carved stone landscape may have served as a miniature representation of this relationship. Over time, the site of Sayhuitins was gradually abandoned. After the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire in the 16th century, many traditional ceremonial sites were no longer maintained. The stone remained in place, but its original purpose slowly faded from memory. For centuries, the carved boulder stood quietly among the Andean hills. Local communities were aware of the stone, but its significance was not widely known outside the region. Modern archaeological research has helped bring attention to the site once again. Today, the Sayhuite stone is recognized as one of the most intriguing examples of ancient Andean stone carving. Visitors who approach the monument can still see the elaborate network of miniature channels and terraces covering its surface. When rainwater flows across the stone, the carvings come alive once again. Tiny streams form along the carved paths. Water collects in the basins. And for a moment, the miniature landscape functions exactly as its creators may have intended. Whether it served as a hydraulic model, a ceremonial monument, or both, the Sayhuite stone remains a fascinating reminder of the ingenuity and creativity of ancient Andean societies. A carved landscape in stone, a labyrinth of channels, and a silent record of how people once studied and honored the power of water in the mountains of Peru. The ziggurat of Dur-Kurigalzu. In the dry plains west of modern Baghdad, Iraq, a massive ancient structure rises from the landscape. From a distance, it looks like a weathered hill of brick and earth standing alone against the horizon. But this is not a natural formation. It is the remains of a ziggurat, one of the most important types of monumental architecture built by the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. This particular monument is known as the Ziggurat of Dur-Kurigalzu. The structure once stood at the center of an ancient city founded during the Kassite period of Mesopotamian history. around 1400 BCE. The city itself was called Dur-Kurigalzu, meaning fortress of Kurigalzu, named after the Kassite king Kurigalzu I, who established the settlement as a new royal capital. At that time, Mesopotamia was already home to a long tradition of urban civilization. Cities such as Babylon, Ur, and Nippur had flourished for centuries along the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Kassite rulers who controlled the region sought to strengthen their authority by building new cities and monumental temples. Dur-Kurigalzu became one of the most impressive of these royal projects. At the heart of the city stood the Great Ziggurat, a stepped pyramid-like structure built from millions of mud bricks stacked into a massive tower. The base of the ziggurat measured roughly 70 meters on each side, forming a huge square platform that dominated the surrounding city. From this base, the structure rose upward in a series of terraces, possibly reaching a height of more than 50 meters when it was fully intact. Today, only the lower portion remains, but even these ruins still reveal the enormous scale of the monument. Ziggurats were not tombs like the pyramids of Egypt. Instead, they functioned as temple platforms, raising sacred spaces high above the ground. At the top of the structure stood a temple dedicated to a major deity. The ziggurat at Dur-Kurigalzu was likely devoted to the god Enlil, one of the most powerful gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon. Enlil was associated with wind, storms, and divine authority. His temples were among the most important religious centers in ancient Mesopotamian cities. The design of a ziggurat reflected the religious worldview of the time. Mesopotamians believed that gods lived in the heavens above. By building towering structures that rose high above the city, people symbolically created a bridge between the earth and the sky. The temple at the top of the ziggurat served as a sacred dwelling place for the deity. Priests would climb the stairways leading to the summit to perform rituals, offer sacrifices, and maintain the temple. The city surrounding the ziggurat was carefully organized. Dur-Kurigalzu included palaces, administrative buildings, residential districts, and temples dedicated to other gods. Excavations have uncovered the remains of a large royal palace complex near the ziggurat, suggesting that the city functioned as both a political and religious center. Within these buildings, rulers governed the region, officials managed trade and resources, and priests carried out ceremonies honoring the gods. The construction of the ziggurat required extraordinary effort. Millions of mud bricks were produced using clay from nearby riverbanks. Workers shaped the clay into rectangular bricks and dried them in the sun. These bricks were then stacked in massive layers to form the core of the structure. To strengthen the outer surface, baked bricks were sometimes used as protective facing. Bitumen, a natural form of asphalt, helped seal parts of the structure and protect it from erosion. The builders also incorporated drainage systems within the structure to help manage rainwater. Without these systems, the mud bricks would have quickly eroded in the seasonal rains. This attention to engineering detail allowed the monument to survive for thousands of years. Dur-Kurigalzu remained an important city for several centuries, but like many ancient capitals, its importance eventually declined. Political power shifted back toward Babylon, and the city gradually lost its central role in the region. As generations passed, buildings collapsed and the population moved elsewhere. The once great ziggurat remained standing, but the surrounding city slowly disappeared beneath layers of soil and sand. For centuries, the ruins lay largely forgotten. Travelers passing through the region saw the massive mound rising from the plain, but few understood its true history. Modern archaeological excavations in the 20th century began uncovering the remains of the ancient city. Researchers revealed the foundations of the palace complex, temple structures, and the massive base of the ziggurat itself. Today, the ruins of Dur-Kurigalzu, known locally as Akar Kuf, remain one of the most visible ancient monuments in Iraq. Even in its partially ruined state, the structure still rises dramatically above the surrounding plain. Standing before the ziggurat today, it is possible to imagine the ancient city that once surrounded it, a bustling center of administration and worship, a place where priests climbed the great stairways to perform rituals high above the city, and a monument that once symbolized the connection between human civilization and the divine world above. The lesser structures of Yaxchilan. Deep within the dense rainforests of southern Mexico, along a winding bend of the Usumacinta River, lie the ruins of one of the most fascinating cities of the ancient Maya civilization. This place is known as Yaxchilan. Unlike many ancient sites that stand in open landscapes, Yaxchilan is hidden within thick jungle vegetation. Towering trees surround the stone structures, and the sounds of wildlife echo across the ruins. Reaching the site even today requires traveling by boat along the river that once served as an important route through the Maya world. The city flourished between about 350 CE and 900 CE during the classic period of Maya history. During this time, the Maya built large ceremonial cities across what is now Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. These cities were centers of political power, religious ritual, and artistic achievement. Yaxchilan became one of the most important cities along the Usumacinta River, controlling trade routes and interacting with nearby Maya kingdoms. The site is especially famous for its impressive temples, carved monuments, and detailed stone inscriptions that record the history of its rulers. But beyond the grand temples and ceremonial plazas lies another important part of the city, a network of smaller buildings and architectural features often referred to as the lesser structures of Yaxchilan. Although these buildings may appear modest compared to the main temples, they played an essential role in the functioning of the city. These structures include residential buildings, smaller shrines, administrative rooms, and supporting architecture that helped sustain daily life within the urban center. Many of these buildings were constructed on terraces carved into the steep hillsides surrounding the main ceremonial area. The terrain at Yaxchilan is rugged. The city was built along a narrow strip of land between the river and the rising hills of the jungle. To create space for construction, the Maya carefully shaped the landscape, building stone platforms that supported houses and other structures. These terraces allowed the city to expand upward into the surrounding hills. Some of the lesser structures likely served as residences for members of the Maya elite. High-ranking officials, priests, and members of the royal court would have lived near the ceremonial center, close to the temples and plazas where important events took place. The buildings themselves were typically constructed from limestone blocks covered with plaster. Roofs were often made using a technique known as the corbelled arch, where layers of stone gradually leaned inward until they met at the top. This architectural style was common throughout Maya cities. Although the interiors of these structures may have once contained painted murals and decorated surfaces, much of that decoration has faded over time. Other smaller buildings may have served administrative purposes. The Maya civilization developed complex systems of governance and record keeping. Officials responsible for managing resources, organizing labor, and maintaining the city likely worked within these smaller architectural spaces. Workshops may also have existed within these structures. Archaeological discoveries at Yaxchilan include tools, pottery fragments, and evidence of craft production. Artisans working in stone, ceramics, textiles, and other materials would have played an important role in supporting the city's economy. Some lesser structures may have functioned as small temples or shrines. In Maya society, religious practice was deeply woven into everyday life. While large temples were reserved for major ceremonies led by kings and priests, smaller sacred spaces may have been used for more localized rituals performed by families or smaller groups. The design of Yaxchilan reflects the complex relationship between architecture, politics, and religion in the Maya world. The larger temples and plazas formed the public heart of the city, but the lesser structures surrounding them created the living spaces where daily life unfolded. From these buildings, people moved through the city's plazas, stairways, and pathways. They attended ceremonies, worked in craft workshops, and participated in the economic and social life of the community. Yaxchilan reached its peak during the reign of several powerful rulers, including Shield Jaguar II, who ruled during the 8th century. Under his leadership, the city expanded and constructed many of its most famous monuments. Stone lintels carved with detailed images and hieroglyphic inscriptions record royal rituals, victories in war, and important events in the history of the kingdom. These carvings are among the finest examples of Maya art ever discovered. But like many Maya cities, Yaxchilan eventually declined. By the late 9th century, many cities across the Maya lowlands were experiencing political and environmental challenges. Trade networks shifted, conflicts between rival kingdoms increased, and populations began leaving many of the great urban centers. Yaxchilan was gradually abandoned. Without maintenance, the roofs of the buildings collapsed. Vegetation slowly reclaimed the terraces and plazas. Over time, the jungle covered the city almost completely. For centuries, the ruins remained hidden beneath the dense forest. It was not until the 19th century that explorers began documenting the site again. Modern archaeological work has since revealed the full complexity of the city. Today, visitors arriving at Yaxchilan can walk along the same stone paths that once connected the temples and residential structures. The towering pyramids still rise above the trees. But the smaller buildings, the lesser structures, tell another story. They remind us that behind the monumental temples and royal ceremonies of the Maya world were ordinary spaces, where people lived, worked, and sustained the life of the city. And in the quiet rainforest along the Usumacinta River, the stone ruins of Yaxchilan continue to preserve the memory of that ancient world. The necropolis of Anghelu Ruju. On the island of Sardinia, not far from the modern city of Alghero, lies one of the largest and most important prehistoric burial complexes in the Mediterranean world. This site is known as the necropolis of Anghelu Ruju. Today the landscape appears quiet and open, covered with low vegetation and scattered rock formations. But beneath the surface of this ground lies an extensive network of underground tomb chambers, carved directly into the soft limestone rock thousands of years ago. The necropolis dates back to around 3200 BCE, during the Neolithic period, when early farming communities were spreading across the Mediterranean islands. At that time, Sardinia was home to several prehistoric cultures that built settlements, tombs, and ceremonial monuments throughout the island. Anghelu Ruju became one of the most significant burial places for these communities. The name Anghelu Ruju comes from the Sardinian language and means red angel. This name may refer to the reddish color of the rock or to the red pigments that were once used during burial rituals inside the tombs. The necropolis contains more than 38 underground tombs, making it one of the largest prehistoric cemeteries ever discovered on Sardinia. These tombs belong to a type of burial structure known as Domos de Janas, which translates to houses of the fairies. According to local legend, these underground chambers were once believed to be the homes of small magical beings. In reality, they were carefully designed burial spaces carved into the rock by prehistoric communities. Each tomb begins with a narrow entrance passage that leads down into one or more chambers beneath the ground. The chambers were carved using stone tools, gradually shaping the limestone to create rooms that sometimes resemble the layout of houses. Some tombs contain multiple connected chambers arranged around a central room. This design suggests that the builders wanted the tombs to resemble homes for the dead, reflecting the idea that the afterlife might continue in a space similar to the world of the living. Inside many of the chambers, archaeologists discovered carved features such as stone benches, pillars, and decorative elements. Some walls were painted with red ochre, a pigment commonly used in prehistoric burial rituals across many parts of Europe and the Mediterranean. The use of red color may have symbolized life, blood, or rebirth. It suggests that the burial ceremonies held here were deeply connected to spiritual beliefs about death and the afterlife. Excavations at Anghelu Ruju have uncovered a wide variety of artifacts placed inside the tombs alongside the human remains. These objects include pottery vessels, stone tools, beads made from shell and bone, and decorative ornaments. Such items were likely placed as grave offerings, meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife. The presence of these objects also provides valuable information about the daily life and craftsmanship of the people who lived in Sardinia during the Neolithic period. Some pottery vessels discovered at the site display intricate designs and carefully shaped forms. These artifacts show that the community had developed skilled pottery making traditions. Other objects found within the tombs include small figurines and jewelry, indicating that personal adornment and symbolic items held cultural importance. Over many generations, the necropolis continued to grow as new tombs were carved into the rock. Families or clans may have used specific tombs repeatedly, placing the remains of multiple individuals inside the same chambers. This practice suggests that the tombs served as collective burial spaces, reinforcing family connections and shared ancestry. The location of the necropolis also appears to have been chosen carefully. The burial complex sits within a landscape that was likely close to prehistoric settlements and agricultural land. This placement allowed the living community to maintain a connection with their ancestors, visiting the tombs during ceremonies or rituals. In many ancient cultures, burial sites were not simply places of mourning. They were sacred spaces where communities gathered to honor the dead and reaffirm their cultural traditions. Over time, however, the communities that built and used Angelurruju gradually changed. New cultural influences arrived in Sardinia during the Bronze Age, bringing different architectural styles and burial traditions. As these new societies developed, the older Neolithic tombs were eventually abandoned. The entrances collapsed. Soil and vegetation covered parts of the necropolis, and the chambers remained hidden beneath the surface for thousands of years. The rediscovery of Angelurruju happened in 1903, when workers digging for building materials accidentally uncovered one of the tomb entrances. Archaeologists soon began systematic excavations of the site, revealing the remarkable underground network of chambers. These excavations uncovered not only the tombs themselves, but also the many artifacts that had been preserved inside them. Today, the necropolis of Angelurruju is recognized as one of the most important prehistoric archaeological sites in Sardinia. Visitors walking through the site can see the entrances to many of the tombs carved into the rock. Some chambers remain accessible, allowing a glimpse into the underground spaces where ancient burial rituals once took place. Although the people who created this necropolis lived more than 5,000 years ago, the chambers they carved into the stone still remain. Silent rooms beneath the earth, spaces built to honor the memory of the dead, and lasting reminders of one of the earliest burial traditions in the ancient Mediterranean world. The Mnajdra megalithic temples. Along the rugged southern coast of Malta, overlooking the deep blue waters of the Mediterranean Sea, stands one of the most remarkable prehistoric temple complexes in the world. This site is known as the Mnajdra megalithic temples. Set on a gentle slope above the sea and surrounded by open countryside, the temples appear almost timeless. Massive limestone blocks form curved walls and narrow passageways that have remained standing for thousands of years. These structures were built long before the great civilizations of classical history. In fact, the Mnajdra temples date back to around 3600 BCE, making them among the oldest freestanding stone buildings on Earth. They were constructed by the early Neolithic inhabitants of Malta, a society that developed one of the most extraordinary temple building traditions of the prehistoric Mediterranean. The Mnajdra complex consists of 3 separate temples built during different phases of construction, but closely connected in layout and purpose. Each temple follows a distinctive architectural design that appears in several other Maltese prehistoric sites. A central entrance leads into a corridor that opens into a series of rounded chambers known as apses. These chambers curve outward from the central passage, creating a layout that resembles a clover-shaped pattern when viewed from above. The walls of the temples were constructed from enormous blocks of limestone. Some of these stones weigh several tons, yet the builders had no metal tools or wheeled vehicles. Instead, they shaped and transported the stones using stone tools, wooden rollers, and coordinated human labor. The precision of the construction is remarkable. Even today, the stones remain carefully aligned, demonstrating the engineering skill of the people who built them. The lower temple of Nidra is particularly famous for its connection to the movements of the sun. The entrance of this temple is aligned so that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, sunlight shines directly through the doorway and illuminates the central axis of the temple. At the summer and winter solstices, the rising sun lights up specific stones along the edges of the chambers. These alignments show that the builders were carefully observing the path of the sun across the horizon. For early agricultural societies, understanding the changing seasons was extremely important. Solar alignments may have helped mark important moments in the agricultural calendar: planting, harvesting, and seasonal ceremonies. Inside the temples, archaeologists discovered several features that suggest the site was used for ritual and ceremonial activities. Stone altars stand within some of the chambers, indicating that offerings may have been made during ceremonies. Animal bones discovered at the site suggest that ritual sacrifices may have taken place during certain events. The temples may have served as sacred gathering, places where communities came together to celebrate seasonal festivals or perform religious rituals. The builders of Nusra also decorated parts of the temple walls with carvings. Some stones display patterns of dots and spirals, while others contain small niches and decorative elements. These details suggest that the temples were once carefully designed spaces intended to create a powerful ceremonial atmosphere. Beyond the temples themselves, the surrounding landscape may also have played an important role in the site's significance. The complex overlooks the small island of Filfla, which lies just offshore in the Mediterranean Sea. Some researchers believe this island may have been part of the visual or symbolic landscape associated with the temple complex. The builders may have chosen the location carefully to connect the temple with both the sky and the sea. Constructing Menajra required enormous effort. Large groups of workers would have been needed to quarry the limestone blocks, transport them across the landscape, and position them into the walls of the temple. This level of organization suggests that the society living on Malta during the Neolithic period was highly structured. Leaders, builders, and religious specialists likely worked together to plan and maintain the temples. For many centuries, Menajra served as an important ceremonial center. But around 2500 BCE, the temple building culture of Malta began to decline. Many of the prehistoric temples across the islands were abandoned. The reasons for this sudden change remain uncertain. Some researchers believe environmental pressures, such as drought or soil exhaustion, may have affected agriculture. Others suggest that new populations arriving on the islands may have replaced the earlier communities. Whatever the cause, the temples were gradually left behind, roofs collapsed, walls eroded, and the once active ceremonial spaces became quiet ruins. For thousands of years, the site remained exposed to wind, rain, and sunlight, yet the massive stones endured. Modern archaeological excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries revealed the full significance of the Menajra complex. Today, the site is protected as part of the UNESCO World Heritage Group of Maltese megalithic temples, recognized as some of the most important prehistoric monuments in the world. Visitors walking through the ruins can still see the massive stone blocks forming the curved chambers and passageways. And during certain times of the year, the rising sun still enters the temple, just as it did more than 5,000 years ago. A reminder that the builders of Menajra understood the rhythms of the sky and shaped their monuments to reflect the movements of the sun across the ancient Mediterranean horizon. Creevy Keel Court Tomb. In the quiet countryside of County Sligo in northwestern Ireland, surrounded by rolling hills and open farmland, stands one of the most impressive prehistoric tombs in the country. This ancient monument is known as the Creevy Keel Court Tomb. At first glance, the structure appears as a long line of large stones forming a narrow chamber beneath the open sky. But the monument is far more complex than a simple pile of rocks. Creevy Keel is part of a special group of prehistoric burial sites known as court tombs, which were built across Ireland during the Neolithic period, roughly between 4000 and 3000 BCE. These tombs represent some of the earliest large stone monuments constructed by farming communities in the region. The design of a court tomb follows a distinctive layout. At the front of the monument lies an open area known as the court. This semicircular space was surrounded by upright stones that formed a kind of ceremonial forecourt. Archaeologists believe that this area was used for gatherings, rituals, and burial ceremonies performed by the community. Behind the court lies the burial chamber, a long stone passage divided into several smaller compartments. These chambers were originally covered by a large mound of stones and earth, creating a structure known as a cairn. Over time, much of the cairn eroded or was removed, leaving the stone chambers visible today. The Creevy Keel Monument measures about 55 meters in length, making it one of the largest court tombs in Ireland. The entrance court is particularly impressive. Large standing stones form a curved enclosure that leads into the narrow passage of the burial chambers. The chambers themselves were built using large stone slabs placed upright to form the walls, with additional stones laid across the top to create a roof. Inside these chambers, archaeologists discovered evidence of collective burial practices. Rather than burying individuals in separate graves, Neolithic communities often placed the remains of multiple people within the same chamber. This suggests that the tomb served as a communal burial site used over many generations. Excavations at Creevy Keel revealed human remains along with artifacts such as pottery fragments, stone tools, and decorative items. These objects were likely placed in the tomb as grave offerings, possibly intended to accompany the dead in the afterlife. The presence of these objects also provides clues about the daily lives of the people who built the monument. Pottery vessels may have been used to store food or drink offerings during burial ceremonies. Stone tools reflect the agricultural and craft activities that supported the community. The court area at the front of the tomb may have played an important role in the rituals surrounding these burials. Researchers believe that ceremonies were performed here before the remains of the dead were placed inside the chambers. Family members and community leaders may have gathered in the court to honor the deceased, conduct rituals, and maintain connections with their ancestors. The design of the tomb may also reflect symbolic ideas about the relationship between the living and the dead. The open court allowed gatherings under the sky, while the enclosed chambers behind it formed a more private and sacred space for the remains of the ancestors. This transition from open space to enclosed chamber may have represented the passage from the world of the living to the realm of the dead. Creevy Keel was not isolated within the landscape. The region around County Sligo contains many other prehistoric monuments, including passage tombs, standing stones, and stone circles. Together, these monuments form a sacred landscape that played an important role in the lives of Neolithic communities. These early farmers had only recently begun settling permanently in the region. Agriculture allowed them to build villages and create lasting monuments that reflected their beliefs and social structures. Constructing a tomb like Creevy Keel required significant effort. Large stones had to be transported across the landscape, positioned carefully, and covered with a mound of smaller stones and soil. This work would have required cooperation among many members of the community. The tomb therefore represents not only a burial place, but also a symbol of collective effort and shared identity. Over the centuries, the monument continued to exist within the landscape, even as the cultures that built it changed. Later inhabitants of the region may have reused the site or added new features. During the Iron Age, evidence suggests that parts of the monument may have been adapted for use as a small metalworking site. Fragments of iron slag discovered nearby indicate that iron production activities took place within the old tomb structure long after its original purpose had faded. Despite these later modifications, the core structure of Creevy Kill remained largely intact. In the early 20th century, archaeological excavations and restoration work helped preserve the monument and reveal its original layout. Today, Creevy Kill Court Tomb is considered one of the best preserved court tombs in Ireland. Visitors walking through the site can still see the curved entrance court leading into the long stone chambers behind it. Standing among the ancient stones, it is possible to imagine the ceremonies that once took place here thousands of years ago. Gatherings of early farming communities, rituals honoring the dead, and the enduring connection between people and the land they inhabited. More than 5,000 years after it was built, Creevy Kill remains a powerful reminder of the beliefs, traditions, and architectural achievements of Ireland's earliest settled societies. The Taula of Torralba Donsalor. On the Mediterranean island of Menorca, one of Spain's Balearic Islands, archaeologists have uncovered a number of mysterious stone monuments that belong to a unique prehistoric culture. Among the most striking of these monuments are structures known as taules. The word taula means table in the Catalan language, and the name describes their distinctive shape. Each taula consists of two enormous stone slabs arranged in a T-shaped form, a tall vertical pillar supporting a massive horizontal stone on top. One of the most famous examples stands at the ancient settlement of Torralba Donsalor, where the taula rises from the center of a large ceremonial enclosure. The monument appears simple in design, yet its scale and purpose continue to fascinate archaeologists. The Taula of Torralba Donsalor was constructed during the Paleolithic period, around 1000 BCE, when prehistoric communities on Menorca were developing a distinctive architectural tradition that included stone towers, burial monuments, and ceremonial structures. The Taula stands nearly 5 meters tall, with the vertical pillar formed from a single massive stone block. Resting on top of it is the horizontal stone slab, which forms the crosspiece of the structure. Together, they create the striking T-shape that defines all Taula monuments. The stones used in the construction are enormous. Transporting and positioning them would have required careful planning and the coordinated effort of many workers. Without metal cranes or modern machinery, the builders relied on simple tools, wooden supports, ropes, and human strength to raise the stones into place. The taula stands inside a large horseshoe-shaped enclosure, formed by curved stone walls that surround the monument. This enclosure likely served as a ceremonial space where rituals and gatherings took place. Within this area, archaeologists have discovered stone altars, animal bones, pottery, fragments, and other objects connected to ritual activity. These discoveries suggest that the taula was part of a religious sanctuary used by the ancient inhabitants of Menorca. Although the exact purpose of the taulas remains uncertain, many researchers believe they were connected to religious ceremonies or sacred rituals. The T-shaped monument may have represented a symbolic connection between the earth and the sky, serving as a focal point for ceremonies performed by priests or community leaders. Some archaeologists have suggested that the structure may have been associated with astronomical observations. The open design of the sanctuary allowed clear views of the sky, and certain alignments within the enclosure may correspond with the rising of specific stars or celestial events. Other researchers believe the taulas may have been connected to Mediterranean religious influences. During the first millennium BCE, Menorca had contact with other cultures across the Mediterranean, including the Phoenicians and later the Carthaginians. Artifacts discovered at some taula sanctuaries include objects linked to these trading cultures, suggesting that ideas and beliefs may have traveled along these trade routes. Some scholars have proposed that the taula sanctuaries may have been associated with the worship of deities connected to fertility, protection, or celestial forces. However, because the builders left no written records, the exact meaning of the monuments remains open to interpretation. The settlement of Torralba dans Salor itself was one of the largest Taliotic villages on the island. In addition to the Taula sanctuary, the site contains the remains of taliots, large circular stone towers that served as defensive structures or observation points. The village also included houses, storage spaces, and pathways connecting different parts of the settlement. Life within the community revolved around agriculture, livestock herding, and interaction with nearby settlements. The fertile lands of Minorca allowed the inhabitants to grow crops and raise animals that supported their population. The Taula sanctuary likely played an important role in the spiritual life of the village. Ceremonies performed within the enclosure may have marked seasonal events, community gatherings, or important transitions in the lives of the people who lived there. Animal sacrifices may have been part of these rituals, as suggested by the remains discovered within the sanctuary. Over time, the Taliotic culture of Minorca began to change. By the 3rd century BCE, the island came under increasing influence from outside powers, particularly the Carthaginians and later the Romans. As new political systems and cultural traditions arrived, many of the ancient ceremonial sites gradually fell out of use. The Taula sanctuaries were eventually abandoned. The buildings of the settlement collapsed, and the stones of the Taula remained standing, quietly within the ruins. For centuries, the monument at Torralba dans Salor stood largely undisturbed. Local communities were aware of the ancient stones, but the true history of the site was not fully understood until archaeological research began exploring the Taliotic monuments of Minorca. Excavations revealed the structure of the sanctuary and uncovered the artifacts that provided clues about its ancient use. Today, the Taula of Torralba den Salor is considered one of the most impressive Taula monuments on the island. Visitors walking through the ruins of the settlement can still see the towering stone structure standing at the center of the sanctuary. Even after more than 3,000 years, the massive stones remain balanced in their distinctive T-shape, a silent monument to a culture that once flourished on the island of Minorca, and a reminder that long before written history reached these shores, the people of the Mediterranean were already building sacred spaces that reflected their beliefs, their traditions, and their understanding of the world around them. Sarku-i is Foro's Nuragic sanctuary. High in the rugged mountains of central Sardinia, surrounded by forests and rocky hills, lies one of the most important sacred sites of the ancient Nuragic civilization. This place is known as Sarku Eisis Foros. Unlike the massive stone towers known as Nuragi that dominate much of the Sardinian landscape, this site functioned primarily as a religious sanctuary and meeting place. For centuries during the Bronze Age, people from across the island likely gathered here for ceremonies, trade, and communal rituals. The site is located near the modern town of Villagrande Stresili, in a mountainous region that once served as an important crossroads connecting different parts of Sardinia. Because of its position between inland valleys and coastal regions, the sanctuary became a natural gathering point for communities traveling across the island. Archaeological evidence suggests that the sanctuary was active between roughly 1500 BCE and 900 BCE, during the height of the Nuragic culture. This civilization, which flourished across Sardinia for many centuries, is famous for building thousands of stone towers known as Nuragi. But the people of this culture also constructed sacred sites where religious and social activities took place. Sarku Eiz Foros is one of the best examples of such a sanctuary. The site contains several important architectural features. Among them are temple structures, circular meeting huts, courtyards, and workshops that once formed a complex religious center. One of the most distinctive buildings at the site is a Megaron-style temple. This type of structure features a rectangular layout, with a front porch supported by stone columns. The design resembles temple buildings found in other parts of the Mediterranean world, suggesting that the Nuragic people may have had cultural connections with neighboring civilizations. Inside the temple, archaeologists discovered altars and ritual spaces where ceremonies may have been performed. These ceremonies likely involved offerings to deities connected with nature, fertility, and protection. Water and fire both appear to have played important roles in the rituals practiced at the sanctuary. Near the temple stands a large, circular building, often referred to as the meeting hut. This structure contains stone benches arranged along the interior walls, creating a seating area for gatherings. Researchers believe that leaders or elders of different communities may have met here to discuss matters of trade, alliances, and social organization. The sanctuary may therefore have served both religious and political purposes. One of the most fascinating aspects of Sarku I is Foros is the evidence of metalworking activity discovered at the site. Archaeologists uncovered furnaces, metal tools, and fragments of bronze objects. These discoveries suggest that the sanctuary also functioned as a center for bronze production and craftsmanship. During the Bronze Age, bronze was an extremely valuable material used to create weapons, tools, and ceremonial objects. The presence of metalworking workshops within a religious sanctuary may indicate that the production of bronze objects had a symbolic or sacred dimension. Some of the bronze artifacts found at the site are particularly remarkable. Small bronze figurines representing warriors, animals, and mythological figures have been discovered in the area. These figurines, known as bronzetti, are among the most famous artistic creations of the Nuragic culture. They were often used as offerings placed in temples or sacred spaces. The sanctuary also reveals evidence of long-distance trade connections. Artifacts found at Sarku A's Foros include objects that originated far beyond Sardinia. These items suggest contact with cultures from the eastern Mediterranean, including traders associated with the Mycenaean and later Phoenician worlds. These connections show that Sardinia was not isolated during the Bronze Age. Instead, the island was part of a wider network of maritime trade that linked communities across the Mediterranean. Goods such as metals, pottery, and luxury items likely moved through these networks, connecting distant cultures through exchange and communication. Over time, however, the importance of the sanctuary began to decline. As new political powers emerged in the Mediterranean and foreign influences increased, many of the traditional Nuragic religious centers were gradually abandoned. By the early Iron Age, the sanctuary at Sarku Isforos was no longer actively used. The buildings fell into ruin. Vegetation slowly covered the stone foundations, and the site remained hidden within the mountainous landscape for centuries. Modern archaeological excavations have revealed the complex layout of the sanctuary and the many artifacts left behind by its ancient inhabitants. These discoveries provide valuable insight into the spiritual and social life of the Nuragic civilization. Today, Sarku Foros is recognized as one of the most important sacred sites of prehistoric Sardinia. Visitors walking through the ruins can still see the stone foundations of temples and meeting huts scattered across the hillside. The surrounding mountains remain much as they were thousands of years ago, quiet, remote, and filled with the echoes of a civilization that once gathered here to honor their gods, forge their bronze tools, and shape the history of ancient Sardinia. The fortress of Nuraghe Santu Antine. In the northern plains of Sardinia, near the modern town of Toralba, stands one of the most impressive and powerful structures ever built by the ancient Nuragic civilization. Rising from the open countryside is a massive stone complex known as Nuraghe Santu Antine. Even today, thousands of years after it was constructed, the structure dominates the surrounding landscape. From a distance, the fortress looks like a cluster of towering stone walls and circular towers built from dark volcanic rock. Its presence is unmistakable. But what makes Santu Antine extraordinary is not only its size, it is the complexity of its design. The monument was built during the Bronze Age around 1600 BCE, when the Nuragic civilization was flourishing across the island of Sardinia. This society constructed thousands of stone towers called nuraghi, which served as centers of community life, defense, and authority. Among all of these towers, Santu Antine is considered one of the largest and most sophisticated ever built. At the center of the complex stands a massive main tower, known as the Keep. Originally, this tower may have reached a height of nearly 25 meters, making it one of the tallest structures of its kind in the ancient Mediterranean. The tower was constructed using enormous basalt stones stacked carefully without mortar. Each stone was shaped and positioned with remarkable precision, creating walls that are several meters thick. Inside the tower lies a large, circular chamber covered by a corbelled dome. This architectural technique involves gradually overlapping layers of stone until they meet at the top, forming a stable roof. The interior chamber of Santu-Antine is particularly impressive. The walls rise upward in a smooth, circular shape, creating a space that feels both massive and carefully engineered. A narrow stone staircase winds upward through the thick walls of the tower, connecting different levels of the structure. Climbing these stairways allowed inhabitants to reach the upper chambers and observation points. From the top of the tower, one could see across the surrounding plains for many kilometers. But Santu-Antine is not just a single tower. Over time, the structure was expanded into a complex fortress. 3 additional towers were added around the central keep, connected by thick defensive walls that formed a triangular bastion. Within these walls lay an enclosed courtyard containing a deep well, which provided water for the inhabitants. This design created a powerful defensive stronghold. Anyone approaching the fortress would have faced towering walls and narrow entrances carefully designed to control access. The builders clearly understood the importance of both defense and visibility within the landscape. Surrounding the fortress, archaeologists have discovered the remains of an entire village that once flourished around the structure. This village consisted of dozens of circular stone houses arranged along small pathways. Each house was built with stone walls and likely covered by wooden beams and thatched roofs. Within these homes, families carried out the daily activities of life in the Bronze Age. Cooking, crafting tools, storing food, and caring for livestock all took place within these spaces. The presence of this large settlement suggests that Santu-Antine was not only a defensive structure, but also the center of a thriving community. The fortress may have served as the residence of a local leader or ruling family who oversaw the surrounding population. It may also have functioned as a place of refuge during times of conflict. When danger approached, the inhabitants of the nearby village could gather inside the strong walls of the fortress for protection. The Nuragic civilization that built Santu-Antine was part of a dynamic world of Mediterranean trade and interaction. Artifacts discovered at Nuragic sites across Sardinia show connections with distant cultures, including the Mycenaeans, Phoenicians, and other Mediterranean peoples. Bronze objects, pottery styles, and decorative items reveal that the island was part of a broader network of cultural exchange. The people living at Santu-Antine were skilled metalworkers, farmers, and traders. Their society combined agricultural life with craftsmanship and regional influence. For several centuries, the fortress and its surrounding village remained active. But over time, the Nuragic civilization began to change. By the early Iron Age, new cultural influences from the Mediterranean began shaping life on the island. Foreign traders and settlers arrived, bringing new technologies and political systems. Gradually, many of the old Nuragic strongholds were abandoned or adapted for different uses. Santu-Antine itself continued to stand, but the settlement around it slowly declined. The houses collapsed, the village faded into the landscape, and the fortress remained as a silent monument to the people who built it. For centuries, the towering stone structure stood alone in the Sardinian countryside. Local communities were aware of the ruins, but their full historical significance was not fully understood until modern archaeological research began studying the Nuragic culture in detail. Excavations revealed the complexity of the fortress and the large village that once surrounded it. Today, Nuragic Santu-Antine is considered one of the most important prehistoric monuments in Sardinia. Visitors can walk through the stone passages, climb the ancient stairways, and stand inside the great central chamber that has survived for more than 3,000 years. The massive basalt stones remain firmly in place, the towers still rise above the plain, and the fortress continues to remind us of the remarkable engineering, skill, and cultural achievements of the ancient Turagic civilization. The Dolmen of Soto megalithic corridor. In the quiet countryside of Andalusia, in southern Spain, stands one of the most impressive prehistoric monuments on the Iberian Peninsula. Hidden beneath a long earthen mound near the town of Trigueros, the Dolmen of Soto preserves an ancient stone corridor built more than 5,000 years ago. At first glance, the monument appears as a low hill rising gently from the surrounding farmland. But beneath that mound lies a carefully constructed megalithic passage tomb created by Neolithic communities long before written history began in the region. The Dolmen of Soto dates back to around 3000 BCE, during a period when early farming societies were spreading across much of Western Europe. These communities had begun to settle permanently in villages, cultivating crops and raising livestock. With this new way of life came the construction of large communal monuments that reflected shared beliefs about ancestry, death, and the spiritual world. The Dolmen of Soto is one of the largest examples of these monuments in Spain. The structure consists of a long stone corridor, nearly 21 meters in length, leading deep into the mound toward a circular burial chamber at the far end. The corridor is formed by large upright stone slabs that support heavy capstones placed across the top. Together, these stones create a narrow passage that gradually guides visitors from the outside world into the darker interior of the tomb. Originally, the entire structure was covered by a large mound of earth and stone, forming a visible monument in the landscape. The entrance to the corridor faces east, a detail that has intrigued archaeologists. Many prehistoric tombs across Europe were aligned with the rising sun. At certain times of the year, sunlight would enter the passage and illuminate parts of the interior chamber. This alignment may have symbolized ideas about rebirth, renewal, and the cycle of life. The rising sun could have represented the transition between death and new life, linking the burial site with broader cosmic patterns. Inside the corridor of the Dolmen of Soto, archaeologists discovered another remarkable feature. Many of the stone slabs are covered with carved symbols and engravings. These markings include lines, shapes, and figures that may represent human forms, tools, weapons, or abstract patterns. Some stones appear to display carved daggers and other objects that were important in the culture of the time. These engravings may have held symbolic or ritual meaning. They could represent the identities of individuals buried within the tomb, or they may reflect spiritual beliefs connected to the afterlife. The carvings also suggest that the monument was not only a burial place, but also a ceremonial space where rituals were performed. Excavations within the tomb revealed evidence that it was used for collective burial. Rather than being built for a single individual, the chamber contained the remains of multiple people. These burials likely took place over several generations. Alongside the human remains, archaeologists found objects such as pottery fragments, stone tools, and decorative items. These objects were likely placed as grave offerings intended to accompany the dead into the afterlife. Such offerings were common in prehistoric burial practices across Europe. They reflect the belief that death was not simply an end, but part of a continuing journey. Constructing the Dolmen of Soto would have required an enormous amount of effort. The massive stones used to form the corridor had to be transported from nearby locations and positioned carefully in place. Without metal tools or modern machinery, the builders relied on simple techniques using wooden rollers, ropes, and coordinated human labor. This level of organization suggests that the communities who built the monument were capable of working together on large projects that required planning and cooperation. The tomb would have stood as an important landmark within the surrounding landscape. Its mound would have been visible from a distance, marking a place where ancestors were buried and where ceremonial gatherings took place. Over thousands of years, however, the monument gradually became buried beneath layers of soil and vegetation. The entrance passage was eventually sealed by natural processes. For centuries, the ancient tomb remained hidden beneath the landscape. The dolmen of Soto was rediscovered in 1922 when a local landowner named Armando de Soto noticed unusual stones while working on his property. Excavations soon revealed the long corridor and burial chamber hidden beneath the mound. Since then, archaeologists have studied the monument carefully, uncovering its structure and documenting the carved symbols found on its stones. Today, the Dolmen of Soto is recognized as one of the most important megalithic monuments in Spain. Visitors entering the site can walk through the long stone corridor, moving gradually deeper into the ancient tomb, just as people may have done thousands of years ago during burial ceremonies. The cool stone walls still display the carvings left behind by the builders, and the narrow passage still leads toward the chamber, where generations of a prehistoric community once honored their dead. The Dolmen of Soto stands as a powerful reminder of the beliefs, traditions, and architectural achievements of early Neolithic societies in Iberia. A stone corridor reaching into the past, a monument built for the memory of ancestors, and a place where the living once gathered to connect with the cycles of life, death, and renewal. The Anta Grande do Zambujeiro Passage Tomb. In the quiet countryside of Alentejo in southern Portugal stands one of the largest prehistoric burial monuments in the entire Iberian Peninsula. Surrounded by open fields and gentle hills near the historic city of Évora, this ancient structure is known as the Anta Grande do Zambujeiro. At first glance, the monument appears as a massive arrangement of towering stone slabs rising from the ground. These stones form the remains of a megalithic passage tomb, built more than 5,000 years ago during the Neolithic period. The word anta is the Portuguese term for this type of monument, referring to large stone tombs constructed by early farming communities across the region. The Anta Grande do Zambujeiro is one of the most impressive examples ever discovered. The monument was originally constructed around 3,500 BCE, during a time when Neolithic societies were spreading across Western Europe. These communities had begun to develop agriculture, raise livestock, and establish permanent settlements. As their societies grew more organized, they also began building monumental structures that reflected their beliefs about life, death, and ancestry. The Anta Grande do Zambujeiro was one of those monuments. The structure consists of a large circular burial chamber formed by enormous, upright stones known as orthostats. Some of these stones rise more than 6 meters high, making them among the tallest stones used in any Iberian megalithic monument. Originally, these stones supported a massive capstone that formed the roof of the chamber. From the chamber, a long stone passage extended outward, connecting the burial space with the outside world. Like many passage tombs across Europe, the entire structure was once covered by a large mound of earth and smaller stones known as a tumulus. This mound would have created a visible hill in the landscape, marking the site as an important ceremonial place. Over thousands of years, however, the mound gradually eroded or was removed, leaving the stone chamber exposed. Even in its current state, the scale of the monument is striking. The chamber itself measures more than 5 meters in diameter, providing enough space for multiple burials. Excavations inside the tomb revealed that it was used as a collective burial site, where the remains of several individuals were placed over time. Alongside the human remains, archaeologists discovered a variety of objects that had been placed within the tomb. These included stone tools, pottery fragments, beads, and decorative ornaments. Such items were likely intended as offerings for the dead, reflecting the belief that individuals might need certain possessions in the afterlife. Some of the artifacts found at the site also reveal connections with other regions of the Iberian Peninsula. The style of pottery and tools suggests that the communities living in the Alentejo region were part of a wider cultural network that shared ideas and traditions. Trade and communication between different groups likely helped spread architectural techniques and burial customs across large areas. Constructing the Anta Grande do Zambujeiro would have required remarkable effort. The massive stones used in the monument were likely transported from nearby locations using simple methods such as wooden rollers, sledges, and human labor. Without metal tools or wheeled vehicles, the builders relied on stone tools and coordinated teamwork. Raising the stones into place would have required careful planning and cooperation among many members of the community. This kind of construction suggests that the monument held great importance for the people who built it. Passage tombs like the Anta Grande do Zambujeiro were not simply burial sites. They were ceremonial spaces where rituals connected the living with their ancestors. During burial ceremonies, members of the community may have gathered around the mound, performing rituals that honored those who had passed away. The stone passage leading into the chamber may have symbolized a journey from the world of the living into the realm of the dead. In many prehistoric cultures, ancestors were believed to play an important role in protecting and guiding the community. Maintaining burial sites helped reinforce social identity and shared memory. Over time, however, the communities that built these monuments began to change. By the Bronze Age, new burial practices and cultural traditions appeared across the Iberian Peninsula. Many of the older megalithic tombs were gradually abandoned. The mound covering the Anta Grande do Zambujeiro slowly deteriorated. Vegetation and soil covered parts of the monument. For centuries, the site remained largely forgotten. Its massive stones continued to stand quietly within the landscape. But their true age and significance were not fully understood. Modern archaeological research eventually rediscovered the monument and revealed its extraordinary scale. Excavations helped document the structure of the tomb and the artifacts placed within it thousands of years ago. Today, the Anta Grande do Zambujeiro is recognized as one of the largest and most important megalithic monuments in Portugal. Visitors can walk among the towering stones that once formed the burial chamber. Even after more than 5 millennia, the orthostats still rise high above the ground, preserving the shape of the ancient tomb. Standing among these stones, it is possible to imagine the ceremonies that once took place here. Gatherings of early farming communities honoring their ancestors. Rituals performed beneath the open sky. And a monument built to ensure that the memory of the dead would endure across generations. The Anta Grande do Zambujeiro remains a powerful reminder of the beliefs, traditions, and architectural achievements of the prehistoric societies that once lived in the landscapes of ancient Iberia.